Remember Clippy, Microsoft's most hated mascot of all time? Working within B2B branding, I was compelled to write a post about mascots within the B2B technology landscape, and I couldn't help but feature Clippy as a prominent point that I was making throughout the post. Now, as the universe would have it, somebody commented on that post. His name is Monte. Monte worked on the Clippy team. This guy was like part of the creation of Clippy. You know, I had to jump all over that. I mean, how freaking cool is that? We start to get to chatting in there. I'm like, dude, can we just have a call? This is so interesting. I just want to like chat with you. Won't this be fun? And after we chatted, I was like, we got to record. We got to record an episode, right? We have to. So this is the episode. This is me and Monte talking about Clippy. It was like 30 years ago, right? Such an interesting conversation. Thank you, Monte, for going deep and just sharing the backstory. I learned things in this episode that I'm like, wow, this is wild. That actually Clippy and all these mascots were built for something completely different. They were not even supposed to be a part of Microsoft Word. That's part of the reason why it didn't work. But I'll save all that stuff for you to hear from Monte and myself talking about Clippy. Mr. Monte, welcome to the show. Typically, I'm speaking with past customers of ours and reliving branding experiences, their experience of working with us and the challenges that come with a big rebrand, if you will. But we got a special episode today. You and I found ourselves in a conversation on LinkedIn and all of its glory, connecting us two crazy cats, because I posted about Clippy. Yeah. Microsoft Clippy. There's going to be people watching this that are probably like, what is Clippy? I hope that's not the case. Maybe we're aging ourselves already. We're going to do a lot of aging ourselves in this episode.
Absolutely.
I already know that to be true. So I'm really excited to talk to you about these early years. Let's call it 1995, 96, I'm guessing, in there somewhere. But before we go there and talk about brand mascots from the olden days, can you just introduce yourself, tell people what you're doing, what you're building, who you are?
Yeah, I'm Monte Atherton, and I have a small graphic design studio here in Santa Cruz, California. We do branding projects for a variety of different type of clients. We also do packaging, websites, some trade show booths, that type of stuff. In my free time, I like to surf, mountain bike, and take full advantage of everything we have here in Santa Cruz.
Yeah, hell yeah, you're in the right spot for that.
Yeah.
But originally, back in the day, at some point, which I was really excited to learn through that LinkedIn post, which is now why we're talking, you were part of the team that worked on Clippy, the mascot for Microsoft Office.
That's right. Yeah, that was a very long time ago. I think what we figured is like 30 years ago, which, in work years, I mean, it must blow away dog years by a max of, 10x or something. I don't know. But yeah, I was brought into Microsoft actually as a temporary employee to work on a piece of software called Microsoft Bob, which most nobody has ever heard of. It was a graphic user interface with the idea of creating real world graphic images or interfaces, like a real life desktop with a Rolodex and a checkbook on it for to help bring in folks like your mom or your grandma and give them the ability to use a computer and understand it more. And we had originally started building those characters for Microsoft Bob long before Microsoft Office had even thought about using us or those characters. So it started on another piece of software, and it drifted over into Microsoft Office. Microsoft Bob actually, it was, I think, 2 weeks away from code complete, and they pulled the project entirely. There was some interesting stuff going on. The internet was becoming hot at the time. I mean, if
Oh,
you can
right. So
imagine.
you're talking like mid 90s, right? So this is this big bull run of the internet.
Exactly. Yeah. I mean, the whole idea of like news feeds online, and I can't even remember the name of the product at the time, but it was like there was a product that was now for the first time ever, kind of live news feeds were coming through it, uh, and it was pretty hot, and I think that they saw that from the Microsoft Bob team's perspective, like we're not doing this internet thing and we're blowing it, so they just
Oh,
kind
okay.
of they
It was the
kind of
early AI race.
exactly, exactly.
Yeah.
And it's kind of sad because there were a lot of redeeming qualities, I think, to the Bob product. But uh, it got axed. So our team was kind of in this weird state of what are we going to do? And then the office team swooped in and was like, we have this new help system we're building into Microsoft Office. And we want to try to port the characters into that help system and have them become now our sort of help agents.
Yeah, so let's talk about some of those characters. Let's bring some real life examples to this. You shared some visuals, which might now kind of make their way into the edit of this video, but you shared some visuals in the LinkedIn post too. What were the variety of characters? Because Clippy was not kind of the token character. There was a whole cast.
Yeah, there was a whole cast of characters. It's interesting because a lot of people don't know that there were a variety of characters. I think I don't remember the exact install protocol, but it wasn't straightforward like, pick your favorite character and get going with Office or anything. It was like it defaulted to Clippy. But we had a variety of characters in there. We had a cartoon cat that was like over the top and super fun. It was more the Warner Brothers, slapstick version of a character. Yeah. We had like a little help robot that zoomed around. There's a variety of them, but the sort of hit character I felt from the whole crew was an Einstein lookalike. We called him the Genius because, well, we didn't license the Einstein name, and you can't really use the name without the licensing. So that was kind of the cast that we had lined up.
Cool. Yeah, really cool to see that old school kind of art come through. So Microsoft Bob. So I was digging around trying to get even my bearings on that time period, and I was curious, like, what other companies? Now this is 1997. That was the timestamp that I found that Clippy like debuted in the Office suite.
Yeah.
So around that time, I was curious what other software companies were trying to leverage what I'm now calling like mascots, right? Was that term even used at that point? They were not calling that a mascot. It wasn't necessarily a mascot. It was a help agent, to use your word, I think.
Yeah. They were officially office assistants. That was what they were coined as, is assistants. I don't remember any other mascots, especially for Microsoft at the time. And we never really spoke about them as mascots. There was an opportunity for Microsoft to license the name rights to Einstein and use his name and likeness and have him be essentially a default character for Microsoft Office. But Microsoft didn't want to pay the money to do the licensing deal at the time, and it's really sad, like that they ended up just kind of defaulting back to like something you find in your office drawer as the character. I mean, Clippy's fine and all, but
shit.
I don't know. It's one of those things where companies go for the safest play. And I don't know what the decision making was behind that. I was far away from that, so I can't even speak to that, honestly. Yeah. But Clippy it is, and sadly, it wasn't Einstein or Earl the Cat who was doing all sorts of crazy, wacky slapsticks fun. Yeah. But that's where they landed, was Clippy.
Yeah, the Einstein one is interesting, and we'll come back around to this, to modern day, more mascots. Appropriately used of the word. Einstein now being a big part, seemingly, of the Salesforce kind of character set. Yeah. So things I found that were of the same time period. This was a really fun kind of transport back for me. these don't really count, but they're as close as I could find. The Apple smiley face as you load into the computer, not a mascot, not a assistant or helper, but it is part of this theme, which I'm going to plug here in a second.
Yeah.
AOL had the running man guy person, man, woman.
Yeah.
So that was like a humanized personification within a tech company of that time period. AOL was obviously a big one. And I found this other one. I actually never knew the name of it. Bonsai Buddy. Do you remember this one?
Bonsai Buddy.
Bonsai. I think you're gonna remember when I tell you what it was, and I didn't know the name. This purple ape, this like purple gorilla. It was strictly a software to do essentially what Clippy was doing, but at the whole computer level. It was an assistant to help people navigate technology.
Yeah.
And its demise, funny enough, was very similar, which was very intrusive. It tried to help with everything in non-helpful ways. It popped up all the damn time. So it kind of fell victim the same way that I think Clippy ended up falling. So I guess my point there is like, there were not many examples of anybody doing this well. But what I was able to determine and started to realize for myself in this kind of internet boom through the 90s, there's this term that came out, the humanization of technology.
Yeah.
Where now computers were moving from these giant mainframe, like take up a whole room, super like intimidating to, oh, now it's in my house.
Yeah.
And I'm supposed to like plug away at it and interact with it. So how do we bridge those two worlds? And I think these were really early attempts. Clippy, even Apple's little smiley face trying to say, this is safe, this is comfortable, you can do this. Even Apple's whole mantra of just making things super easy to use for the modern everyday person, right? It's all built off of this like humanizing technology. And then to fast forward, interestingly enough, I think some of that is like rebirthing itself today. We see it a lot in B2B technology companies where they don't want to feel super intimidating tech as a brand. They want to feel approachable. That word's thrown out a lot. Approachable. Yeah. So I think technology seems to always be battling this. How do we make it feel more human? So, I just thought that was interesting that time period they were trying to kind of shift what technology meant. And it's kind of first man through the door kind of effect. Like maybe those early years, those weren't going to work.
Yeah.
Right? It was too early.
It was too early. I mean, there are a lot of things that we take for granted now because of the power of the machines we have in our pockets, essentially.
Yeah.
But at the time, when we were trying to develop these characters, part of it was just optimizing file size. And, where at the time, modern resolution for things that you would watch was like 32 frames per second. So you go to a movie, it's 32 frames a second. And that's kind of what animation was being created at the time. And, we had to build into a custom tool that Microsoft had developed for us, an internal team just for that tool. And we animated at about 12 frames per second. And we're talking about 12 frames per second. These are optimized, GIFs. Like, they were pixelated and, it just, I like, when I look back at them at the shots, I'm just like, man, they looked horrible as far as quality because we just didn't have any option. Yeah. It was very, very constrained. And you're right. Like the whole idea of human computer interaction and humanizing that experience was just starting to happen. So our team at Microsoft was actually working with a duo at Stanford. The two professors had done all these studies and written a book on the human-computer interaction and how we respond to computers and technology the same way you and I do, Bill. Like there's a lot of social nuance, a lot of just ingrained ways we act as humans that we port over to our technologies. So like when your computer, like you lose a file, and it's stupid computer and you get angry, like get this computer, and it's this like, blame that you're giving to a machine that has no feelings. It does what you tell it to do. Sometimes it crashes. Yeah. I mean, we all do, right? Yeah. But the computer's no more stupid from that crash than anything else it does. It's just a matter of its functions.
Yeah.
So the Clifford Nass and Byron Reeves were the two professors from Stanford, and they were part of the roadshow and talking about how this computer human interaction affected technology and how building personas and characters on top of these interactions made it more human and made it more relatable as people. And that's why Microsoft Bob was going the direction it was going, because they knew that if we can humanize this experience, that the people using the technology, the people on the computers are actually going to have a better experience. They're going to relate more. I mean, it's just like all of the benefits just stack right up to like more and more close to a human interaction or human relationship. And that was what drove a lot of the thinking and those technologies at Microsoft, why they were pushing for characters and stuff. And you see it now where it's developed into Siri and Alexa.
Yeah. Right.
I mean, they've taken the face off, right? They've gotten rid of the visual character because now we can just speak to the device.
Yeah.
But, you know, long after we had left Microsoft, we had spun off and started our own company working on what we called social user interfaces, like the next level up from graphic user interfaces, right?
Okay. Yeah.
And our goal was to build more help systems or create more agents that could solve problems for other companies beyond Microsoft Office assistants. And at one point, a guy came in that was like in advanced technology. He was like a thinker in the cloud, right? He just dreamed up stuff. And he had like a prototype of a tablet computer. And it was like serial number like 004 or something. And I think Bill Gates had 001. Wow. So that's how close this guy was to the top of this like advanced technologies group.
Yeah.
And he was talking to us about characters and stuff. But again, he wanted to talk to us about like, how would we get this tablet with a new interface where you just drew right on the screen? Like, you know, these crazy new ways of thinking about computing. Maybe we need a character or a persona that helps guide someone through this new computing experience. So a lot of people were thinking about this, like, what is the next move? Like, what's the next way to interact and connect with our technology that's more human-like and that feels less like, you know, programming a computer, you know, to get stuff done.
Yeah. It definitely highlights that even Microsoft Bob was like, it was ahead of its time. It was trying to tackle the big problem.
It was.
In Clippy, you know, now maybe people listening, people that watch this are going to have a little bit of empathy and sympathy for like, oh, Clippy wasn't necessarily meant to be that. And there was a bigger vision. And it actually was a valuable vision, a vision worth having. It's just ultimately the time period, the execution, the product, all of those things didn't match up in a way that it was a wild success. But it was the early days of trying to crack this nut where, like I said, I think people are still trying to crack it. Now with AI, how do we make AI feel not scary and like it's going to take over the world and humanize it to a point where it is helpful in what we're trying to accomplish? Same problem, but I think the world is probably more ready.
Yeah, and that the ability to create solutions for those problems, like there's so many more tools at our fingertips. You know, the computing power to do this stuff is there now. The technology was a huge constraint back then. And, you know, did that make or break it? I don't think so. I think, you know, what really made the Microsoft Office Assistant so annoying was, well, there's a few reasons. One, we had designed and animated these characters around a completely different product. Like, we didn't even build these for Microsoft Office. So I mean, you know, from branding, like we want to know who our audience is. Who are we talking to, right? Like if we don't talk to the right person, the message gets missed and the brand fails. Yes. Pretty simple, right? Yes. And that's kind of what happened with the Microsoft Office assistants. We built characters and a cast meant to help your grandmother write checks through a computer. And now we're getting put into a product that is people doing business tasks all day long. And the tasks are much broader than what we had tried to cover. Some of them being way more complicated, like, I mean,
Yeah.
having an assistant wave its finger and like, are you sure? Like, are you trying to create a pivot table right now? Well, nobody knows what a pivot table is. Like, why would the character ask me that? Like, I'm writing a proposal for some business development or something. Like, it's those misses.
Really great points on the misalignment of the execution of intended audiences and how that ties back to brand and all those things. Those are really great points there. Next question.
Yeah.
Do you feel like the verdict was out on Clippy really quickly? Like when we all look back, especially when I look back now, I'm kind of like, oh, I don't know that there was ever a shining moment. Like, Clippy was always just annoying. But was there a period of time where like it had a moment to stick, or was the verdict out pretty quick of like, what is this? This is annoying. And I guess maybe additional question, were you as one of the creators on the creative team kind of like, damn, everybody hates it?
Well, that's a great question. I mean, a little perspective, no matter how much people hate something, when they released that version of Office that had the Office assistants, I was told at the time, it's like, just imagine that tomorrow when this product releases, 93 million people will open up your product and see work you've done. I don't even know how to get my head around that today. Like and it's not something that makes you rich or famous or any of that, but it's like a different level of like, holy shit, man. Like that's a lot of people seeing your work. Yeah. So in that sense, it's like, wow, whether it becomes a meme or not, it's an honor and an interesting to have worked on a product that's that big and that widely viewed and known about. It's an interesting thing to hear. What was the other part about your question?
I like the perspective. I mean, I was asking the question basically like, do you feel like the verdict was out really quick, that it was a success or not?
Yeah. So as far as like when the product first dropped, I think there were a lot of reviews of the product and people kind of like, hey, what's this help thing, this agent, this office assistant? There was a lot of snubbing of it.
Okay.
But we went into it knowing that it certainly was not a great implementation of what we had built. We ourselves were critical of it. We were also sad that it wasn't in the product it was developed for. So we already had this behind the scenes relationship, but so when people are like, yeah, it's not great, we're like, yeah, no kidding.
No shit.
We could have made it a lot better if the opportunities were different. And then also there are a lot of people that actually do love Clippy and do love the assistants, have actually benefited from using the product and, oh, I think he's cute or whatever. Like people do have a relationship with him. And that is cool. That it wasn't a full fail. And when you're building something like a help system, you have to just assume like the people that are reviewing those products, they're like way up here on the sort of technology understanding. They're advanced level tech people. They're early adopters. They're doing that thing. Yeah. But then you have everybody else. And there are big parts of everybody else. There's like a big category of folks that just go to the office and use Office because they have to. They're not trying to be tech elites or anything. They just have to get a task done. Yeah. And I do think that humanizing the help system, even with all its warts that it had, I do think that was a good step forward in how we thought about our tech products, right? Help at your fingertips, like assisting people in a more humanized way to get a task done. And to make it feel less like just searching technical books or documents of how to write a pivot table. So it's it's mixed feelings for, I think, probably for all of us on the team.
Yeah, it's as you're speaking and I'm realizing, it's fun to poke fun at Clippy to some degree, and I think we can all do that with kind of open hearts and open arms, like no harm intended. But what a powerful movement that created. It makes me think that AI is just a super powered Clippy. It's still trying, largely, everyone's incorporating AI into all their products to do ultimately what Clippy was trying to do. Make things faster, make things easier, to be there to support somebody and what they're trying to build. The essence of the goal is the same.
Yeah,
Clippy had to pave the way.
totally.
It had to be the one that's like, I guess I'll go out there and start this whole thing, and I'll take the bullet for everybody else because I'm not supposed to be in this platform, and I'm going to do the best I can.
Right.
But definitely set the stage. And then, 30 years later, people are still trying to build that capability into their products. Still.
Yeah. AI built on the shoulders of Clippy. That's a
yes.
hilarious image in my head.
It's like it's the Scooby-Doo meme, where you're like, you take off the mask of the bad guy and it's like, who is it? And it's like AI, but you take the mask off and it's just like Clippy. It's just Clippy underneath. You're like, holy shit, it was Clippy the whole time. Wow.
That's too funny.
Good stuff.
It's one of those things too, like it's reached pop culture in the ways that are unexpected, that he's been on The Simpsons and The Family Guy, and like that he keeps getting mentioned 30 years later. And whether that impact is good or not, either way, I don't really care. It's fun to see your work pop back up and you're like, wow, we are a cultural thing, even if people are laughing at it, it's still like, well, Clippy
it's
made
a cultural timestamp. It really is a cultural timestamp.
Yeah.
And I think that even comes back to the point of the value of a mascot or personifying anything, whether it's called a mascot or not. We can all identify, remember it, relate to, hate, etc. We can't necessarily do that to software. Not to the same degree, because it's not personified in a way that a mascot might be.
It's true.
Let's go to final question then, because there are some brands doing this well now. Top of mind for me are Salesforce with their Astro character. It's not a kind of a help agent necessarily, but it is a personification within their company to kind of offset just tech. I think of Freddie from MailChimp is a really big one.
Yeah.
Making email and newsletters fun. That's not how they would pitch Freddie. Octocat. Octocat is another big one from GitHub.
Yeah.
Right? So that basically personifies the community, the developer community, and they kind of hold true to the Octocat as a kind of tokenization of that community. And then there are brands like Intercom. I don't know if this is a great example, but these are closer examples of like amorphous personifications. Like it's not a being, it's not an animal, it's not a human, but it is a thing, a bot in Intercom's example that tries to act in human type ways there to help.
Yeah.
So that's a long way to lead into my final question. If a brand is thinking about some type of mascot, what do you think is most important for them to understand about it? We've covered a lot of topics, but if there were one thing that you're like, and this is why they're valuable, or this is what you should take seriously or avoid, what's your perspective now 30 years later?
That's a great, difficult question. Thanks for wrapping it up on that one.
Yeah. I just figured I'd drop a bomb on you.
Yeah. No, it's an interesting challenge, I think, for any company to tie their brand image to a persona of any type, whether it's a live person or an animated amorphous character, like whatever. You have to, I think, understand and try to connect to their audience through the character. You don't want to alienate them. It's got to fit in the sort of conversation the proper way, right? Mm-hmm. And that's why we built a cast of characters for the office assistants, because Clippy wasn't right for everybody, but there was a cat and a dog and a robot and all these other things that might connect better to a person. So I think it's important for a brand to know who their consumer or their customers are and to try to find something that's going to win within that audience. And you see a lot of this happening now. Like, we do work on food packaging, and so I'm always watching the food packaging market, and there's a huge push for like fun, loose characters on packaging now, which is it's really fun to see. It's like making food purchasing fun in just the smallest way, but it gives it persona and it helps it stand out from other things on the shelf. So it really depends on what you're trying to do with that character. Are they just on the sidelines? Are they like really in your face? Are they a spokesperson? Or are they just a part of the logo? And it was cute that part of our company values is that human to human connection. And so we want to show that in our logo. So we found a way to make a face. Hello, Amazon logo.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
So like there's sort of the subtle all the way to like the very interactive. And you have to just find what works for your brand, your company, your product, because not all characters are going to work good in all situations.
Yeah. Well said. Yeah. It's not that mascot is the solution. Nothing is necessarily the silver bullet solution for anybody of any part of a brand identity.
Yeah.
You have to figure out what is authentic to you and what will relate to your customer, like you said. Very well said. But if you can find it, it does give you another tool in your tool belt.
Definitely. I feel like MailChimp is a very interesting example because I feel like they're going away from their mascot.
Yeah.
They're kind of like, Intuit now owns them.
That's
and so they're slowly shaving off the personality and they're slowly making it just strictly a work tool.
Yep.
And, I got on MailChimp early. And so I'm like really invested in this persona that they've created through their character. And it's sad to see him kind of getting sidelined. So it's a really interesting point for them, I think, in their branding. Like, well, how do you let go of a persona that you've had for years and years and years? Like, and how does that make your customer base feel? Because now I have emotional attachment to a company in a way that never would have happened if they didn't have that character to begin with. But now they're talking about letting it go. Like, how does that affect the customer base on an emotional level, and how will they react? I mean, who knows? I mean, there's obviously big agency people thinking this through or not, but it's something that's happening, and it'll be interesting to see. I don't think there'll be a big blowback, but I think there's probably going to be some disappointment.
Yeah, it's an interesting point. I'm glad you brought that up. And it could be that Intuit has decided we're going more enterprise. It fits better into our suite if it is less of that. Okay, that's a business decision.
Totally.
And maybe they're okay with that business decision, but it is happening in real time. Yeah, that's a great example. And really good point on it has created an emotional connection that otherwise would not be there.
Yeah.
I mean, if that's not the asterisk or the kind of the checkbox for the episode here, which is just like the power that an element like that can bring to a brand is maybe unknown to most. How powerful that can be. Like you said, we're still talking about Clippy 30 years later. Call it a success, a failure, whatever. It sounds like it's all of those things really to a bunch of different people. But without that, we're not even talking about anything 30 years ago, right? So it has an effect is probably the big takeaway.
Yeah.
Monte, thank you. This is going to be a nerd-tastic episode for people that are either in design and mascot and all this stuff. Thanks for joining the show. I look forward to staying connected with you, sir.
Sounds good, man. I had a great time. It was fun to talk about times of yore.
Abacuses and those types of tools that we used back in the day.
Yeah. Drawing in stones with chisels.
Oh, man. We old men. We're still here. We're doing it. All right, buddy.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you, Bill.
All right.